the tax fraud case against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, it's in its 7th day in United States District Court in Alexandria, Virginia. This is the first case to be tried by special counsel Robert Mueller. It's focusing on Manafort's business dealings prior to him joining the Trump team as campaign manager. Here to discuss the trial, break it down, because it is a tax fraud and a criminal case. It is very serious offense. We have our fantastic managing attorney of our tax department, Carmela Walrond, and our managing attorney of our criminal defense department, equally as fantastic, Paul Hirsch. Paul, Carmela, welcome.
Thank you.
So Carmela, let's break this down. He is being charged with tax fraud. What is tax fraud?
Underreporting your income to the IRS.
So Paul, what would be the charges if you're underreporting income to the IRS? What would be the charges brought against you?
It's a 32-count indictment, and it stems from hiding or evading taxes on about $30 million in overseas income.
So Carmela, let me ask you a question. He's being charged or being accused of hiding more than $30 million in income internationally. What are the rules for declaring income? Because we have a lot of people who live in America and are immigrants and get income from all over the world. What are the rules for declaring income if you are a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident? If you earn income in another country, what are the rules for declaring that income in the United States on your tax return?
Sure. Under the Spar rules, if you have more than $10,000 in a foreign bank account anytime during the year, you must report that to the IRS.
So is he being charged or being accused of anything else other than the $30 million that he refused or that he neglected or purposely refused, intentionally refused to declare on his taxes?
Well, he's also charged with tax fraud because he vastly underreported his income.
So those are two different separate charges, Paul. Is that correct?
Yes, there's many charges. Not only those, but also for lying to banks in order to get loans.
So that's why you get one indictment and multiple charges.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And the indictment would be just one. Tell us what an indictment is versus what charges are.
Sure.
Because some people don't know.
Sure. An indictment is what the government brings forth and charges you with a crime.
Right.
And in that indictment is the separate and distinct charges that the government accuses you of doing.
So what is he looking at? If he's been indicted in Virginia, he's looking at multiple charges against him. If he is found guilty on all charges, how long is he going to jail for?
Decades.
Decades. Basically, he's going to die in jail.
Decades, unless he lives to about 100, yes. He's facing decades and financial penalties.
Right, so I guess he's in his 40s or 50s. Yeah, I mean, decades would be 20, 30 years in jail.
Somewhere in that range.
Right,
yes.
so the rest of his life basically in jail.
It certainly seems that way.
They've brought out the accountant who got immunity, and the accountant said that Manafort was cooking the books. They brought out Gates, who was his partner and deputy campaign manager of the Trump campaign. He also got immunity. He also pled guilty to criminal charges, and he's being cross-examined about what his involvement is in the scheme that he pled guilty to, as well as some other extramarital affairs that he may or may not have had with other women while he was married. Why, as a defense attorney, would Manafort's attorneys be doing this, and how do you think this is all going to play out?
Well, they're attacking not only what happened, but this individual's credibility. If they can destroy his credibility to the jurors, they may not believe Gates. They may not believe when he says that Manafort colluded with him and told him to do X, Y, and Z. They may conclude that Gates did it on his own.
So what do the prosecutors have? What is the burden that the prosecutors have to reach to prove their case?
Well, each count has separate and distinct elements. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the standard in a criminal prosecution, whether federal or state. It's a high standard, as it should be. And the district attorney's office has to prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt.
Why would the U.S. attorney be carrying on about his $15,000 leather jacket that we read about in the news all the time, all his fancy suits? Is that just to paint him as a bad guy? What is the purpose of of that he bought a brownstone in Brooklyn for $3 million in cash. What is the purpose of doing that from the U.S. Attorney's perspective?
Well, because on his taxes, he claimed he made X amount of money. And based on his purchases, his lifestyle, you can't possibly purchase those items if you made as little money as he claimed in his tax return.
Well, a $15,000 jacket, I would assume he would be able to.
Yes.
So maybe that's just to paint him as like
Well,
a greedy guy. I can understand the brownstone, the $3 million
Sure.
in cash brownstone.
Sure. Yes, it certainly, they want him to look bad, right? I mean, as a prosecutor, you want to make this guy look as bad as he can, that not only did he commit these crimes, but look at what he spent it on. This money wasn't spent on camps for kids or, other civil organizations. This was spent on him, a pool with a flowing waterfall and other stuff that jurors may not like.
I wanted to interject that the other issues that he was in trouble for is regarding loans. The IRS has very, very strict rules on reporting of a loan. If it's not a loan, it will be considered as income. And that's what's happened in this matter.
How do they determine? So where did he claim he got loans from?
They claim he received it from the banks, but the accountant falsified the documents from the bank.
Okay. But these loans were not loans from the banks. Where did he get this money from?
From the Russian oligarchs.
From the Russian oligarchs.
Yes.
Okay. So how does the IRS determine whether the Russian oligarchs, for example, the claim is this is not money earned. The oligarchs loaned him money,
right,
and he was paying it back to them. How do you determine?
Sure.
How does the IRS determine this is money he earned versus this is a loan?
Okay, because this is something very similar to what I did for one of my clients. For something to be considered a loan, you have to draft a promissory note stating the amount of the loan and the repayment period. Also has to be reported on the books.
And basically what they brought to the accountant is you falsified these documents after the fact,
Yes.
and that's why the accountant ended up turning state's evidence to avoid any sort of prosecution.
Correct.
And now the accountant is saying that Manafort told the accountant to do all of this.
Correct.
And that is a separate count and a separate charge besides the $30 million in underreported income and the lying to the IRS.
Correct.
All which would end up ultimately getting him in jail for 20, 30 plus years.
Correct.
Why, Paul, we read that he is in jail today?
Well, he has a separate matter pending in Washington as well. And that judge there, who set the original bail, determined that him and his attorneys and investigators and team approached several witnesses on this matter and the Washington matter as well, and believed that to be tampering with witnesses, and determined that that is in violation of his bail.
Now, this guy Gates, who was his partner in this crime, in this conspiracy, he pled guilty to his own criminal activity. Was he a smaller fish? Is it usually the U.S. attorney wants the biggest fish? And what did he plead guilty to? And what is he saying in his testimony right now that Manafort did?
Well, he's testifying, and yes, the federal government wants to work their way up. They don't go to get the big fish and work their way down and get all the little guys. They go the other way. They go and get the little guys in hopes of getting the bigger fish. And Gates, they determined to be a little fish.
So now Gates is looking at 71 months in jail, which is about 5 years, in return for, I guess, if you get sentenced to 71 years, you get some time.
71 months, yes.
71 months. So you're probably looking around a little over 5 years, maybe?
Yeah, there's a chart, actually. The federal government does it a little different than the states. There's no parole. There's none of that. You get a little bit of good time. So in about 4 or 5 year jail sentence, you save about 6 months.
So Gates turns state's evidence. He says, you know what, I don't want to go to jail for 30 years. I'll take the 71 months. I'll do a little over 5 years. I'm going to turn state's evidence. He's now coming to court and admitting that he was cheating on his wife with whether it was mistresses or women or prostitutes or whatever it was. He has admitted to committing financial crimes, underreporting income. Gates has admitted to falsifying documents with the IRS. What is Manafort? Now, Manafort, I assume, was given some sort of plea deal and turned it down. What is, we don't know what that was,
right.
Okay? But what is Manafort's defense to all of this? You got his accountant and his business partner coming in saying, you're a crook.
Right.
And what's Manafort's defense?
He's saying, no, I didn't do anything. These guys are criminals. Of course they're turning state's evidence. Look how much evidence that the government has against my accountant who was responsible for filing my tax returns. And look at my business partner who was stealing money out from our business and needed to make these things up so that he wouldn't get in trouble. You see that all the time in these type of prosecutions. And I think the defense team has a tough road here.
So,
and also Manafort signed off on those tax returns too.
so when you're the one who signs off, you're signing off under penalties of perjury.
Yes, you're ultimately responsible.
What do you expect to see happen over the next course of the next few days?
Well, you can expect a lot more from Gates. I mean, I think we're not done watching him being cross-examined on the witness stand. There'll be other witnesses, probably a lot more forensic type witnesses, more forensic accounting going through some of the books. There were also several international bank accounts that were open and money flowed through those. You'll probably hear some witnesses testify as to things of that nature.
All right. So why are there, by the way, there's 2 trials, Paul. Why is there 2 trials going on?
You mean his second
Is
trial?
there going to be a second trial in
Yes.
Washington, D.C.?
Yes, that's the more politically relevant trial. The one in Virginia is about these tax returns, tax frauds, and hiding of income.
So we already heard from Carmela. She said, she's handled cases like this before. She would go over their bank accounts, prepare new profit and loss to at least, show, hey, we're trying to be truthful now,
So
right?
in this case, like if I had a similar case, what I will do is go over the bank statement, prepare an amended tax return, which will look favorably in front of a judge, if this case goes that far.
Paul, what would you do as a criminal defense attorney? Are the defense attorneys acting appropriately? Should they have taken a deal? You think Manafort's going down? What do you think ultimately, you have a guy who everything is going against him.
Yes.
He's got nothing positive going on in this case, and by all accounts, it looks like he's going to jail for the next 30 years. Do you think this is like a situation where he's just counting on Trump to give him a pardon?
There's been months of this conversation. I wouldn't, begin to understand what's happening behind that closed door. But there's a lot of political motivations here. I think one of the reasons that the prosecutors chose to try this first case in Virginia is because it's a much more conservative, pro-prosecution type of jurisdiction, and they're worried about having the first case in Washington, D.C., which is a much more liberal jury. They want to start this, Mueller's investigation. This is the first trial. They want to start it off on the right foot. They want to get a conviction.
Well, Trump has tweeted. He's tweeted a bunch of tweets in favor of Manafort. Some of them are not necessarily true. He tweeted a while back, wow, what a tough time for Paul Manafort, who has represented Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and many other top political people in campaigns. He wrote on a Twitter post the day that his bail was revoked. Trump also said, he worked for me for 49 days or something? I feel badly for some people because they have gone back 12 years to find things. I don't know how you can feel badly for someone who was hiding $30 million in taxable income. You got to pay your fair share like anybody else. Now, Manafort did not work for Trump for 49 days. No. He worked for Trump for 5 months, and as a matter of fact, had a relationship, at least we know in this trial, going back with Trump to at least 2012, because there's an email exchange between Gates, Manafort, and Donald Trump in 2012, where Manafort sent Trump his Yankee tickets.
Yeah.
So this relationship with Manafort and Trump has gone back several years, although Trump, he himself is not on trial, nor is the Russian collusion, which is really conspiracy to commit an election fraud.
Right.
So Giuliani's correct when he says there's no collusion, but there is a conspiracy statute, and the conspiracy statute is, did you make an agreement with a foreign power to undermine the U.S. election?
Yep.
We will find out about that. My guess, and I'll let you, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. We assume, based on everything we see, that Manafort's going down. Okay? Now there's a second trial. I think between the first and second trial, he's going to be looking to Trump to pardon him. Trump's pardoned everybody. All right, Trump has pardoned Joe Arpaio and suggested pardoning other people as well.
Yeah.
Martha Stewart, the governor Blagojevich, he said he may pardon. So I wouldn't be shocked if Manafort's holding out for a pardon, and if he doesn't get that pardon before the second trial, maybe he may turn to Mueller and say, "Okay, now I'll talk."
Right.
Because there is going to be a second trial. He's waiting to see what Trump does after this. It's my guess. I don't know for sure.
Right.
Now, if Trump does pardon him, I would assume that his attorneys would be concerned that the sheer fact of pardoning somebody who has testimony who perhaps may have pertinent testimony against Donald Trump for crimes he committed towards a conspiracy to rig the U.S. election with the Russian government, if in fact that's where the facts are leading. We don't know what Mueller has. That in of itself could be obstruction of justice.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way, and it gets dicey as you start to weed your way through this. It also could be that this is a bit of a game of chicken. That at all points the federal government thought that Manfred would turn state's evidence against Trump, and he didn't. So here we are at a trial. Now he'll get convicted, and or not convicted, but if convicted, now he has another opportunity. Should he go to the federal government and say, "Okay, here's what I have. Help me out with my sentence. I don't want to do 20 years in jail."
Or 30,
or
30 years.
or the rest of my life,
Right.
and the lifestyle I know is gone.
Now, on a separate note from Manafort, Carmela, I have one more tax question for you.
Yes.
It was reported in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, Michael Cohen, another nefarious character in President Trump's circle.
Yes.
He's President Trump's longtime personal attorney, whatever that means, and fixer, whatever that means. He owns some medallions, some taxi medallions, and underreported income on those taxi medallions. What do you know about this, and what you think could possibly happen in terms of tax consequences and criminal consequences for Michael Cohen?
Yes, because taxi medallions is like a lease, so it's considered something like rental income, and he's supposed to report that on his taxes. And a failure to do so is tax fraud. So in his case, he may strike a deal with the prosecutors and may turn state evidence against Trump. But those are very, very serious charges for not reporting the income from taxi medallions.
And that's several $100,000.
Yes.
And you've represented people,
Yes,
and with
I have.
Paul,
Yep.
you represent people jointly in these tax criminal, because tax evasion, tax problems lead to criminal charges.
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
And you
Often.
jointly represent people both as a tax attorney and as a criminal defense attorney. Michael Cohen, if he was your client, what would you tell him to do?
Immediately amend his tax returns. Immediately.
And basically the whole
And
point
he
is
may want to hire a good attorney. Too.
right.
Yes.
and I guess the point would be to show that now that it's been brought to my attention,
Right.
I am making every effort to fix it.
Right.
And
Because
the amended tax return is an admission, saying, yes, I'm making a correction to my tax returns, and I'm paying the applicable taxes and penalties.
Right. So he's coming forward and
Yes.
saying mea culpa
Right. Yes.
before now Martha Stewart and even Leona Helmsley. If you remember, Leona Helmsley was the wife of Harry Helmsley, the big real estate tycoon, and also Martha Stewart, both sent to jail, both multimillionaires, not only for lying on their taxes, but then continuing the lie. So it was the continuation of the lie that ultimately got them prosecuted versus you were found out, quickly fixing it, and then saying, and then basically pleading your case to the court that I fixed it, I'm a good person, and beg for mercy.
right, that was a mistake as opposed to a criminal activity.
Right.
Right.
Well, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with this Manafort. By all accounts, it looks like he's going to be going to jail for a very long time. What's going to be interesting is after the conviction, which should come down sometime next week, unless they have Manafort's attorneys pull some rabbit out of their hat, or the jury is just simply not listening to the testimony, which could always also possibly happen. But by all accounts, from what we read, and now I haven't seen the trial, but from all accounts, from what we read and what they are presenting as the prosecutor's presenting, he's going to be going to jail for a long time. There's going to be another trial. It'll be very interesting to see what Trump does and if Manafort flips before the second
Yeah,
trial.
and Cohen.
And
as
Cohen
well.
as well.
Cohen
Yeah.
as well.
Well,
yes.
Cohen looks like he's flipping already.
It certainly sounds like Trump has left him out,
out to
and
dry.
now Cohen's about to say, "Oh yeah, well here you go."
Yeah. Well, Paul Hirsch, fabulous job. Thank you for filling us in.
Sure.
Carmela Walrond, thank you for filling us in as well.
Thank
Carmela's
you.
a fabulous tax attorney here. Anybody who, at Spar and Bernstein, anybody who has any tax issues, owes taxes, or anything with their tax returns, Carmela is your attorney, and of course Paul Hirsch, a district attorney in Brooklyn for 15 years, now on the other side here at Spar and Bernstein, and doing a fabulous job for our clients who are sometimes in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Sometimes they are.
Thank you very much, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
Thank
Brent.
you.